Do you mean that your mother taught school only until her original kindergarten children reached 7th grade?
Yes.
And then she became librarian?
Yes. And I was there, I suppose, because I didn't go to public school until I was in the 7th grade. But I don't remember going to school at all. But I guess I learned enough that I could enter the public schools in the 7th grade. I was just at home. Mother was teaching school. She taught in the home.
So you sat in on your mother's school?
And she started teaching before I was old enough to go to school, so I ran around and did whatever, I don't know. One time, Mother said that, I remember this too. I was sitting we lived in this apartment building. It had been a land company office when the Middlesboro was started by this group of investors. An Englishman started it. And this was the land bank building that after the bubble burst, it was converted into apartments, and we lived on the 3rd floor. There was an elevator there, but it never worked. It was an elaborate elevator, but I guess when the building was built, it worked. They had stairways winding around the elevator. And I was sitting on the first step of the 2nd floor, where there was a Army recruiting office. And I was barefooted and had gotten a splinter in my toe and was trying to get the splinter out. So this Colonel Moody from Knoxville, who was making an inspection of the recruiting office, was there, and he saw me sitting on the step trying to get the splinter out of my toe. So he came and helped me get the splinter out and asked me where I lived, and I told him. So he took me by the hand, and we went upstairs to where my mother was teaching school and knocked on the door and introduced himself and asked her if he could take me downtown to get me some ice cream. So she said, well, let me change your dress. And we went. And every time after that, when he made inspections of that recruiting office and came from Knoxville, he would always come and ask to take me out. And one time he took me to the circus. And when I graduated from high school, I sent him an invitation to my graduation. And he sent me a string of little tiny pearls, which I still have. But I'll always remember him.
You remember his name?
Moody, Colonel Moody. Mother I was supposed to go to Tazewell to stay with grandmother for a while, and he came back and forth on the train. He was going back to Knoxville. So he took charge of me on the train to Tazewell, where somebody was going to meet me. And the windows were open because they had no air conditioning in those days. And I dropped a barrette or something out of my hair. I don't know what. Anyway, it fell out the window. So he gets up and pulls the cord that stops the train so he can get out and recover my barrette for me. I don't remember anybody admonishing him for stopping the train, but he did.
I'd like to talk about your father a little bit, if we could. Where was he born? And what was his name?
He was born in Greenville, Tennessee, and he was named for his father, Thomas Dickens Arnold.
How did he meet your mother?
Well, he came to to read law and then eventually practice law in Tazewell with his brother-in-law, George Montgomery, who was married to his sister, Eugenia.
Do you know anything about the circumstances under which they met?
Well, as I understand it, they was at a gathering place for the young people, a spring or something, I don't know, where water was flowing out in pipes, and he saw my mother and was very attracted to her, and I don't know, they just met there in Tazewell.
Do you know when they were married?
They were married there, I can't give you the year, but they did not have an elaborate wedding. They, as I understood from Mother, they were married after a Sunday church service. They stayed and the minister stayed, and I suppose some of the family. But it was a very private wedding. They were married. My grandmother did not really approve of them getting married.
Do you know why?
Well, not really. But I guess one reason was he was so much older than she was. My father was 10 years older than my mother. That seems to run in the family because my grandfather was older than his wife, too.
Now, how many years approximately did they stay in Tazewell?
Well, Elsie is 8 years older than I am. It must have been 10 or 15 years.
And he was practicing law
Yes,
there.
with his brother-in-law.
Do you know why they chose to come to Middleborough?
Well, the only thing I can figure is that I think that he thought that maybe he was getting sort of a rough deal with his brother-in-law. I don't know about the financial situation. Or maybe he just wanted to be on his own. I don't really know.
Do you know why they chose, or why he chose Middlesboro above some other possibilities?
Well, it was a short distance away, and I guess at that time it was the most desirable location. I don't know whether he had any. He did have a partner, but I don't remember what his name was when he first started practice there. That might have had something to do with it.
What do you remember about your father as a father?
Well, I remember I thought that he was wonderful. He could do anything. If I had anything that was broken I wanted fixed, I would go to him and he would fix it. If I wanted to know anything, I asked him and he would know the answer. If he didn't know it, he would look it up and then he would tell me. What I understand about later, he was in ill health for a long time there. But some of the attorneys in Middlesbrough told me that he was a very good attorney. He was not a good businessman. He didn't make money from the practice of law. He had a lot of clients, but they were not able to pay him. A lot of it was paid in vegetables or something. Whatever they had, they would pay him, but he would take cases if he thought they had justice on their side. But he was not a good businessman, so he didn't profit financially. And that was why we were very stressed financially, and that's why Mother was teaching school. And my sister was also always doing things like handiwork and things that she sold. And eventually when she graduated from high school, she taught 1 year in the mining colony up there. She'd go by train and teach us, and that was all she could take. She couldn't stand going up there. So she got a job with the L&N, and she worked for the L&N the rest of her working life. She retired when they made her retire. She was after 70 years old when she retired. I'd never married. She's the one that's still living.
Can you describe the background of Middlesbrough, how it came to be?
Well, there was first the Cumberland Gap Trail. That's where the road to the early settlers going west. And they finally found a way to get across the mountains at Cumberland Gap. And a man named Arthur, I think, realized that there was coal, abundant coal in the mountains around there. And they thought iron, too. There was some iron ore. So he enticed a group of investors to put money in building a city there that they thought would eventually be 100,000. It never did reach that point, though, because the iron turned out to be too small in quantity to. They built an iron furnace there, but they didn't find enough iron, and coal was their main financial asset. So he got these people. The Bank of England, I think, financed it, and came and bought this land with the coal mines on it. They bought it from early settlers who had just lived on the land. They didn't know anything about the coal. And they still own the rights to this. The American Association is still there in Middlesbrough and still owns rights to many of the mines around there.
What is the American Association?
Well, it was the American arm of investors from England. The reason that Middlesbrough didn't turn out, it was planned with these wide avenues and all, which they still have. And they had I have a book that explains it all, but I just right now can't remember it. But anyway, the Bank of England, a bank in England, failed. And that was the crisis of 1800 or something this was a part of it. They went bankrupt. So all of these grand ideas, they lost the money and they couldn't go forward with them, and a lot of them left that had come there. They had built expensive homes, buildings, hotels, resorts, and whatnot. So when my father went there, this had all disappeared, but these buildings were still there. The memories were still there. And some of the people, the American Association was still there. The people in our church were mostly connected with the American Association.
So when your father went there, the splendor of the town was past.
Gone.
But some of the buildings were still there.
Oh, the buildings were there, and still are, some of them. The building that we lived in was, as I say, the land bank building. That was the American arm. It was connected with the American Association.
What did the buildings look like? Had they fallen into some disrepair, or had they been kept up pretty well?
No, they were being kept up pretty well. I think
we're looking at a book of Middlesbrough, Kentucky, that was published when? 1889, did you say?
Well, it was published about, they didn't put a date on it, I'm sorry to say. Middlesbrough was founded and incorporated about 1892, and this was 25 years, they speak of 25 years ago in the book. So that would make it about 1900. I guess it was after 1900 and something, in the early 1900s that the book was published. It was after the collapse of the city.
So, and you said that the city collapsed perhaps 25 years before your family came there.
Yes, at least that. Yes, the city was water supply, Fern Lake. It was a lake that was fed by mountain streams and springs, and was always considered absolutely pure, and it was a great asset, and also a place that we would, for our recreation, Sunday afternoons we'd walk to the lake just to look at it because the surroundings were so pretty. They did let people go out on it in rowboats, but they were very strict about what you could do, and that was a lot of people our recreation was walking and hiking. When I was very small, my brother and I don't know why Mother let us do it, because I guess it was all right. Nothing ever happened to us. We'd walk over the mountain and then hike up to the top of the pinnacle by ourselves and talk nothing about it. And nothing ever happened to us, so I guess it was all right. But walking out to the lake wasn't quite as big a thing as that, and it was done by everybody just to see the beauty of the lake and to see the rowboats. And when my husband came there, and we were, that's one of the things we would do, would go out to the lake. Here's a picture of us in the rowboats. And I got him to go one time to go up to the pinnacle like my brother and I used to do. But that was enough for him. He said he would never go up there again unless it had a road that he could ride. So before we left there, they had a road, and he rode up there.
How long did it take to hike to the top?
I don't know. It was an hour or two, I guess, because it was just, we were small, but we just, I don't know how we did it, but we'd get up to the top because when we were up on the pinnacle, we could see so far away. We just enjoyed doing it. It was recreation. You know, children nowadays, you have to think of something for them to do. But we always had something to do, like hiking up a mountain and running to the pinnacle. And there was a hotel in Middlesboro, the Middlesboro Hotel. It had been, it was beautiful, beautiful grounds, and they had a fountain, swimming pool, and all sorts of things. But of course, this was after the prosperity. But we'd go and walk over the grounds, pick wildflowers, and just enjoy the scenery. I did a lot with my brother. I was very close to him when we were very small. Then he got over and joined the Boy Scouts, and I couldn't be with him, and I missed him.
Did the mountain that you climbed to the top of have a name?
Well, it was Cumberland Mountain, and they called it, we got to the top, and then we did go to the pinnacle, which was something else. That was very high.
And when you stood on the top and looked at the view as you described it, did you see the rest of the mountains around? Was that the view?
Well, we saw, they said, I think you could see 3 or 4 states from the pinnacle. It was that, it stretched out that far. During the Civil War, as I understand the part that I'm talking about, they had a cannon up there. And it went back and forth between the Northern and Southern armies as to who had possession of it, because it was a strategic point. And after, I guess it must have been the Union that had an enormous cannon there or something after the war was over. They couldn't get it back down. They didn't want to leave it there, so they pushed it over, and it was shattered at the bottom after the war.
As far as the lake was concerned, did you swim in it?
No, no swimming allowed. They could boat, but no swimming because it was our drinking water.
Do you remember other kinds of things you used to do in the summertime?
Oh, yes, we did all sorts of things. We lived in this apartment building. It had been an office building, made into an apartment building, and it had a backyard, but it was not landscaped or anything. It was just there, and they had trash piles and whatnot in it. But Ernest and I made a garden there one summer. We planted popcorn. That was one thing we had to plant, and I think we had a good crop of popcorn. But in digging a garden, well, we'd come across little scraps of metal, very small scraps. I don't know what they were from or anything about it, except that they were metal. And there was a junkyard dealer in town. So we would get all these little pieces of metal we could find and take them to the junkyard, and he would pay us for them, nickel or a dime or whatever. And that's the way we got our money to ride the merry-go-round when the carnivals came to town, because I remember we enjoyed riding the merry-go-rounds. My brother was always very close to me. Looking back, I just think about all the things he did for me then. One time he made me a set of doll furniture out of cardboard and upholstered it with blue velvet. And there was called the Aloha Club in the Courier Journal that we got. It was for children. They had various kind of contests. And he would help me. I don't know whether he was too old to enter the contest or not, but anyway, he would help me with my entrance. And I remember that what you'd win when you won was books. And I loved that because I love books, still do. And I didn't have too many. The books that I read, I had to read Thomas Hardy and Dickens and Shakespeare because that was what I had. I didn't have children's books. But when Mother became librarian, then I had a lot of different kind of books to read. But I enjoyed what I won from the Courier Journal because they were various and sundry. books that we got for prizes for entering these contests.
What was your entry, or what were your entries that
Well, they were
books?
puzzles, I think, or drawing pictures or something. I don't remember now. Various things that you filled out and sent in, and they.
You said you loved books. Did you use the library a lot when your mother was the librarian?
Well, in fact, I helped catalog it. They had this Carnegie building there. The building was there from the time that we went there, I think. But it had not been used as a library. Carnegie donated it to the town, but it wasn't, for some reason, it wasn't financed. So they got books donated by the residents of Middlesboro to make books for the library. And I suppose the city then made some arrangement for the librarian and maybe something to buy books with. But when Mother went there, it hadn't been cataloged. So somebody from the state or whoever, I don't know who knows about it, that knew how to catalog books in the library, came there. And I helped, Mother and I helped, we cataloged the books there. And she was a good librarian because, I mean, she was good with the children. The children loved to go there, and she would recommend books for them and whatnot. And they asked me to be librarian of the high school library when I was in high school, and I was for a while, but I got to thinking that it seemed like that people didn't sort of resented the fact that I was librarian, so I resigned.
When you say they resented it, do you mean they were envious, or?
Well, I don't know. It looked like it set me apart some way. I don't know.
How old were you when you helped your mother catalog in the Carnegie Library?
I must have been about 12 or 13.
Did you find that working in the library changed the kind of reading you did from the classics like Hardy and Shakespeare into books more geared for children, or not?
Well, as I say, I read Hardy and Shakespeare because that was all I had to read, and I had to read. I read everything. I was
but when you
omnivorous.
had the library, you had other things that you could read.
Yes.
You just read everything?
Yeah. Well, I read Jean Stratton Porter. That was one girl, Limberlost and whatnot. And whatever was popular at that time. Elmer Gantry, I think I also read.
Did you have a favorite book or a favorite author?
Not at that time. I was just omnivorous.
When did you read? When did you read?
I don't know. Anytime, every time. Well, until I started in the public school, I guess that was I don't remember much. I was at home most of the time. I really didn't know too many people, except the church was the only place that I mingled with other people, I guess.
What about school? You were 12 years old when you went to public school, or 7th grade?
I must have been. I entered in the 7th grade, and for some reason or other, I guess it was a stressful occasion for me to enter public school for the first time. Anyway, I got sick. I had to withdraw, and I didn't go back that year. So the next year, I entered 7th grade again with a different teacher. And from then on, I had no problems. I guess I just didn't know how to be with a public school, since I'd never been in any school except my mother's home.
Did you get to enjoy it after that first?
Oh, yes, I
experience?
enjoyed it.
Were you a pretty good student?
Well, I suppose I was. I was valedictorian in my graduating class. Because my sister and my brother had been before me, and my father was in Atlanta. So if I hadn't been, I'd just course, my poor little brother came along and he wasn't.
How big was your class?
I don't know, maybe 50. Not like it is today, but for that time it was a pretty good sized class.
Do you remember any particular teachers that influenced you as you went through the schools?
Well, this Latin teacher I liked very much. The first time she had an examination, she said, she thought I didn't know anything until I took the examination because I just didn't talk very much. And she became quite a friend of me. I mean, friend of mine, classmate of mine. We liked her, and in the summertime she taught us to play bridge and whatnot. But then, really, a teacher that I remember was a Mrs. Forgotten her name anyway. She was an older lady, taught math. And I had algebra as a freshman with a male teacher. I didn't know anything about algebra. None of the class did. So Mrs. whatever her name was, came the next year and was supposed to be teaching us second year algebra. She found out we didn't know anything about algebra, the whole class. So she says, well, I'll have to teach your first year algebra first. And then she taught us the both years in that 1 year. And she was like that. She was the superintendent of the schools at that time.
Were you in one school from 7th grade until you graduated?
Yes. There's one school, there was only one in town.
Do you remember anything else about the school besides the classwork? Were there other activities?
Oh, yes, there was an oratorical contest on the Constitution of the United States. And I didn't have much opposition. I think I won that in the school. And then I went someplace else in Kentucky, I've forgotten where it was now, someplace where there's a university, to compete, to go national. I didn't win there. And in the 8th grade, the teacher we had then had us do pantomimes or something for the entertainment at the school. We always met for chapel all together, all the classes together in the auditorium. And some minister from the community would talk to us.
Did you have any particular friends that you remember?
Well, I had one special friend, Elizabeth Chandler. I was tall, and she was short, and they called us Mutt and Jeff. But we were inseparable.
What kinds of things did you do together?
Well, we didn't really do much. I mean, after school we might go to the drugstore and have a drink or something together, and neither one of us dated. One time they had a dance at our church. It's the only one they ever had. I guess had it not in the rector's house. And the son of one of the communicants was designated to take me to the dance. I mean, it was an arranged affair. But there was a visitor to town there from Jellicoe, Tennessee. And I danced with him. And he wanted to take me home. But no, I had to go home with a man, the boy that had been designated to bring me. I never saw the guy from Jellicoe again.
What part in your life did the church play, or in your family's life? What part did the church play in your family's life and in your own?
Well, I would just say that we were churchgoers. We went to church every Sunday.
This was the Episcopal Church?
Yes. And when I was real small, the Ralstons there, Miss Bessie and her sister, they had some of the girls from the church to their home, and we did fancy work there. They were both good at doing that. And at Thanksgiving, they would have elaborate Thanksgiving dinners. And they had a guild, I think they called it, where they made handiwork things to sell. And I helped with the polishing the brace. Most of it was brace, the fittings in the church. I know one time somebody's idea was, it wasn't ours, it was an older person, to use vinegar and salt on the altar rail, which was braced. But I guess we didn't wash it off enough, but it was corroding it. We had to go back and do it all over again.